December 19th, 1944. The Ardennes forest was frozen solid, and so were the men trapped inside it. In the Belgian town of Bastogne, nearly 10,000 American soldiers, the 101st Airborne Division plus scattered units, were completely surrounded. German tanks closed in from every direction, panthers, tigers, steel beasts grinding forward through frozen roads. Artillery never stopped, shells smashing into streets, barns, and cellars where wounded men lay wrapped in thin blankets. Morphine was nearly gone, bandages reused, ammunition counted bullet by bullet. No air support could reach them. The sky was a solid gray ceiling, and Bastogne was alone. Hundreds of miles away, at Supreme Allied headquarters in Versailles, France, General WWII Eisenhower stood over a massive map, red arrows punching deep into Allied lines. Hitler's last gamble, his final counterattack, threatened to split the Allied front, possibly dragging the war on for months. Eisenhower rubbed his eyes, jaw tight, absorbing the weight of the situation. "How long can they hold?" he asked. Silence. Finally, an officer whispered, "For days. Maybe less." 4 days. The roads were iced over, German units blocked every approach, most Allied forces were stretched thin. Some advisors argued relief was impossible, others warned moving reserves would expose other sectors. Eisenhower listened, then asked a single question: "Where is Patton?" George S. Patton, bold, audacious, and reckless to some, would have to pivot his entire army 90 degrees in the dead of winter under enemy fire. If he failed, Bastogne would fall, the 101st would be destroyed, and Hitler's counterattack might succeed. Eisenhower stared at the map, at that tiny surrounded town. 4 days. That's all they had left. And somewhere in the freezing darkness of Bastogne, American soldiers waited, listening to tanks in the distance, clutching rifles with numb fingers, hoping anyone would come. December 19th, 1944. In the dim tense halls of Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force at Verdun, the air was heavy with smoke, paper, and fear. Maps were spread across long tables, red and blue pins marking troop positions, frozen roads, and German advances. The room was quiet except for the occasional scratch of a pencil, the rustle of documents, and hushed reports delivered by aides. Grim faces surrounded General Dwight D. Eisenhower, each reflecting the impossible challenge before them. The 101st Airborne was surrounded at Bastogne, outnumbered, and low on ammunition and medical supplies. Allied units in the north and south were too distant to offer immediate relief, and the Ardennes winter had made every road a sheet of ice. Eisenhower stared at the map, jaw clenched. "How quickly can we mount a relief operation?" His voice cut through the tension, calm but insistent. Generals shifted uneasily in their chairs. One officer cleared his throat. "Sir, realistically, it would take at least a week to move 3 divisions through snow, ice, and enemy positions." Eisenhower's gaze hardened. "We don't have a week. 4 days. 4 days is all." A murmur of disbelief ran through the room. Some whispered to each other, others shook their heads in quiet frustration. Every officer understood the stakes. Failure meant the loss of Bastogne, the destruction of the 101st, and a significant psychological blow to Allied morale. Then, the room's tension shifted. General George S. Patton leaned forward, eyes sharp, voice confident. "We pivot the Third Army. 3 divisions. 100 miles in 48 to 72 hours. Roads frozen, yes. Enemy in the path, yes. But it's possible. I've already prepared contingency plans. December 22nd, my 4th Armored Division will strike north, breaking through to Bastogne." Gasps and incredulous whispers spread like wildfire. Generals exchanged skeptical glances. Some shook their heads, disbelief etched into their faces. "You can't move an army that fast," muttered one, barely audible. Eisenhower's eyes locked on Patton, weighing audacity against feasibility. "George, can you genuinely do this?" Patton's expression never wavered. "Sir, I've accounted for every possibility. Supply, ice, enemy resistance. I've run the simulations in my head a dozen times. We reach Bastogne in time. That town will not fall. The stakes could not have been higher." Eisenhower's mind raced, not only through strategy, but morality. Thousands of lives depended on this decision. If Patton failed, the 101st would be lost, and the blame would fall on both commander and man. Yet hesitation risked inaction, which in this moment was tantamount to surrender. "Sir," another officer interjected cautiously, "even if we attempt this, the roads are nearly impassable. Fuel, rations, mechanical failures, it's a logistical nightmare." Patton leaned back, voice steady, almost casual. "Then we work faster. We anticipate breakdowns. We reroute. We keep moving. It will be difficult, impossible to some, but impossible has never stopped us before." Eisenhower exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of command settle on his shoulders. He thought of the men in Bastogne, huddled in freezing cellars, rationing bullets, listening to tanks in the distance. Time was slipping away. December 22nd was the target. 48 hours to push forward under the worst conditions imaginable. Every hour mattered. The room fell silent again. Officers studied the maps, calculated distances, whispered concerns. Patton's audacity hung in the air like a challenge. Eisenhower realized there was only one path forward: trust this man. "Very well," Eisenhower finally said, voice low but resolute. "We proceed as you've outlined. Patton, the clock is ticking. 4 days. The world will be watching, and lives hang in the balance. Do not fail us." Patton's eyes gleamed with controlled determination. "Sir, we will not fail." As aides began to relay orders, Eisenhower lingered, staring at the frozen map of Bastogne. The moral burden, the fear, the hope, all collided in one thought: the coming days would decide everything. The clock was ticking. Will Patton reach Bastogne in time? The impossible march begins. December 20th, 1944. Patton's Third Army began its audacious pivot. Disengaging from positions in the Saar region, tanks, artillery, and infantry swung 90 degrees north. The roads were buried under ice and snow, the blizzards reducing visibility to mere yards. Engines groaned, treads slipped, and horses, still used for supply wagons, struggled through drifts taller than men. Every mile was a battle. German patrols harried the flanks. Artillery fire ripped through forests and frozen towns. Ambushes slowed progress, and every frozen bridge felt like a test of nerves and steel. Eisenhower's office at Versailles was tense and silent, save for the scratching of pens and clatter of telegraphs. Hourly updates streamed in. Third Army advanced 12 miles north. Roads iced over. Casualties reported. Supply trucks delayed. He read each report, jaw tight, hand gripping the letter he had been drafting, contingency messages to families in case Bastogne fell. If they fail, 10,000 paratroopers are lost, and the Ardennes campaign may collapse. He whispered the words under his breath, a prayer disguised as strategy. Meanwhile, in Bastogne, the 101st Airborne fought like men possessed. Ammunition dwindled to a handful of rounds per man. Medical supplies were exhausted. Wounded soldiers huddled in cellars, shivering, bandages soaked and frozen. Artillery shells battered streets and walls. Yet morale refused to break. When the Germans demanded surrender, Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe famously replied, "Nuts." The response echoed through foxholes and command posts, a small but defiant spark in the freezing darkness. December 21st. Patton's men moved relentlessly. Tanks plowed through snowdrifts, engineers cleared collapsed bridges and felled trees blocking narrow roads. Infantry hauled artillery through mud and ice. A platoon froze in the open when a snowstorm struck unexpectedly, but Patton pressed on, sending urgent radio orders: "Keep moving. Maximum effort. We will reach Bastogne." Soldiers whispered among themselves, disbelief and awe mixing in equal measure. "He's actually doing it." At Supreme Headquarters, Eisenhower tracked progress with a mix of hope and dread. Clocks and calendars marked the passage of time, each hour a reminder of the 4-day survival limit. Reports arrived hourly, advances measured in miles, casualties in dozens, breakdowns in supply lines. Every decision mattered. Eisenhower scribbled notes, revised strategies, and kept communication lines open with Patton. "Maximum effort," he sent. "The 101st cannot hold much longer." Patton's confident reply came within the hour: "Sir, I've got the men moving. We will break through. Nothing will stop us." December 22nd. The attack officially began. 3 divisions advanced under relentless fire, snowstorms obscuring movement and freezing hands and faces. Tanks clashed with German armor in narrow passes, artillery rained down on both sides, and infantry fought tooth and nail to clear roads. Each mile gained was a victory, but the clock was unforgiving. Soldiers, exhausted and frostbitten, pushed forward, inspired by Patton's unwavering confidence. Eisenhower's night was sleepless. He checked maps, consulted staff, and whispered his own doubts, for days to save them. Outside, reports trickled in, advance 18 miles today. Roads blocked by enemy fire. Heavy losses in 3rd Armored. Each update alternated between hope and anxiety. December 23rd to 24th. Progress continued, slow but steady. German resistance stiffened near key villages, slowing columns and forcing flanking maneuvers. Ice-crusted artillery fired from hidden positions. Patton's commanders improvised constantly, rerouting units, adjusting schedules, risking everything to maintain the timeline. In Bastogne, the 101st counted bullets and rations, each hour a torment. Soldiers' letters home were smudged by frozen fingers, prayers whispered for relief that might come too late. December 25th. Christmas dawned under gray skies. Soldiers in Bastogne huddled around meager fires, some sharing what little food remained, others staring at the snow blanketing the town. Patton's army pressed on despite storms, frostbite, and enemy resistance. Eisenhower's updates reflected cautious optimism, 3rd Army still advancing. Estimated contact with Bastogne tonight or tomorrow. All commanders alert. Every hour mattered. Each mile gained was hard-won. The countdown was relentless. 4 days. 4 days to save 10,000 men trapped in the frozen hell of Bastogne. Communications crackled with updates, soldiers whispered courage to one another, and commanders adjusted, rerouted, and pushed relentlessly forward. December 26th. The final hours approached. Patton's lead units crested the hills north of Bastogne. The frozen roads had been conquered, snowstorms endured, German resistance blunted by audacity and speed. Inside Bastogne, soldiers strained to hear distant engines. Eisenhower, staring at maps for the 100th time, felt his pulse quicken. The impossible march was nearly complete. Will Patton reach Bastogne in time to save 10,000 men? The answer hung in the winter air, like the engines rumbling closer, each mile a heartbeat toward salvation. The climactic breakthrough was near. December 26, 1944, 2:30 p.m. Patton's 3rd Army crested the final ridge north of Bastogne. The blizzard raged, snow whipped sideways, and exhausted men and tanks plowed through drifts taller than some soldiers. Engines strained, treads slipped on ice, and artillery crews cleared frozen roads under sporadic German fire. Every mile was earned with grit, sweat, and sheer determination. Snow-caked trees fell under artillery blasts, creating narrow passages for infantry to push forward. The horizon opened to Bastogne, a battered town, frozen and encircled, but still holding. The first scouts of the 3rd Army made contact near the southern edge. The 101st Airborne, huddled behind rubble and barricades, squinted through snow and recognized the approaching figures. Shouts of allies rang through the cold. Relief and disbelief rippled through foxholes. Soldiers rose from hiding, waving rifles, tears freezing on their cheeks. "Are you real?" one paratrooper whispered to a passing tank crew. "Yes, we're here," a tank commander replied, voice strained but warm. "You're safe now." At 3:15 p.m., Patton himself rode forward, overseeing the breakthrough. His voice, rough from shouting over engines and wind, carried to the surrounding soldiers. "Hold tight. We've got you." Paratroopers broke formation to shake hands, embrace, and cheer. The battered defenders of Bastogne cheered, some collapsing from exhaustion, others saluting in relief. The air, filled with the scent of snow, gunpowder, and smoke, vibrated with human triumph. 4:50 p.m. The moment Eisenhower had been waiting for arrived. The phone rang at Supreme Headquarters. His aide handed it over. "George, we're through to Bastogne." For a long moment, Eisenhower couldn't speak. Relief washed over him. He could hear distant shouts, the muffled artillery falling silent in the confirmation of survival, and the voices of his men, alive, defiant, victorious. Patton's voice came over the line, gruff but steady, "Just doing my job, Ike. The men did the real work." Eisenhower exhaled, shoulders dropping for the first time in days. Eyes moistened, voice quiet but firm. "No, George. You moved an army 90 degrees in a blizzard. You saved 10,000 lives. That's why you're invaluable." Whispers from staff and generals in the room punctuated the silence. He actually did it, against all odds. Some nodded, or written across their faces. Others silently replayed the impossible logistics they had doubted just days before. Eisenhower allowed himself a rare smile, the weight of command lightened by a single victorious moment. In Bastogne, soldiers of the 101st embraced the men of the Third Army. Ammo was distributed, wounded were carried to safety, and morale soared. Patton walked among the troops, inspecting units, offering words of encouragement. "You did the real work," he reminded them repeatedly. Humility and pride coexisted in his measured voice, each acknowledgement a tribute to the human courage displayed. Strategically, the breakthrough was a turning point. The Ardennes offensive had been halted, the German counterattack shattered, and Allied momentum restored. The audacity of moving 3 divisions 100 miles in the dead of winter, overcoming frozen roads, enemy artillery, and logistical impossibilities, would be studied in military schools for generations. Privately, Eisenhower reflected on the enormity of the moment. Public statements praised Patton and the Third Army for bravery and coordination, but his diary captured the deeper significance. Patton has saved not just Bastogne, but the Ardennes campaign. What we've witnessed is operational brilliance and human courage. As evening fell over the snow-covered town, soldiers gathered around fires, shared rations, and whispered their gratitude. Tanks were parked in streets now safe, paratroopers cleaned weapons, and commanders coordinated supply lines. Patton surveyed the scene, nodding to officers and men alike, his expression a mix of satisfaction and resolve. The storm outside continued, indifferent to victory, but inside Bastogne, warmth, relief, and triumph filled every corner. Eisenhower, in a quiet moment alone, allowed himself to breathe deeply, the weight of days of fear and doubt finally easing. The impossible march had been completed. The 101st was saved. Bastogne held. And history had been made. December 27, 1944. Eisenhower sat alone in his office at Versailles, the dim light of a winter morning catching the edges of maps and scattered letters. The relief of Bastogne weighed heavily on him, not as a victory announced in newspapers, but as a moral and strategic triumph that came at immense risk. He opened a notebook and wrote in his precise, deliberate hand. "George Patton has executed the impossible. 3 divisions, 100 miles, under blizzards, ice and enemy fire. Bastogne held. 10,000 lives spared. I feel both relief and awe, tempered by the knowledge of how easily this could have failed." He paused, gazing at a map marked with frozen roads and red arrows of enemy advance. Commanding Patton, brilliant yet impulsive, had been a delicate balance. Trust had been required, tempered by careful oversight, and Eisenhower knew the audacity of Patton's plan could have led to catastrophe if miscalculated. Yet, in those frozen Ardennes hills, Patton had delivered beyond all expectation. A letter to Patton, dated December 27, 1944, lay open on the desk. "George, your planning, courage, and execution saved lives beyond measure. Never forget the responsibility that comes with such talent. Bastogne stands because of your audacity, but also because of discipline and foresight. History will remember this day, but so too will I." Eisenhower's mind drifted to private correspondence with Churchill and Marshall. Publicly, accolades had been exchanged, celebrating victory and morale. Privately, he acknowledged the razor-thin margin of success and the weight of every decision. "The Ardennes campaign might have collapsed without this relief," he wrote, "and yet, it is human courage, rather than mere strategy, that preserved our lines." Patton's operational genius was clear. The rapid pivot of 3 divisions in winter, overcoming frozen roads, enemy artillery, and logistical impossibilities, was a feat that would be studied for decades. But Eisenhower knew the human element was equally vital. The courage of the 101st Airborne, enduring hunger, cold, and encirclement, combined with Patton's relentless drive, had created a moment where strategy and bravery converged. January 2, 1945. Eisenhower drafted a private note to his staff. "Leadership is tested not in comfort, but in extremes. We witnessed audacity, human courage, and the delicate balance between risk and trust. Managing extraordinary talent is as crucial as planning any maneuver. Patton embodies both brilliance and challenge. The snow outside mirrored the stillness of reflection. Eisenhower allowed himself a rare moment to exhale, imagining the men returning to Bastogne streets, tired, battered but alive. He recalled individual acts of heroism, the paratrooper refusing to abandon a comrade, the engineer shoveling artillery through ice, Patton issuing orders while frost bit his face. Each decision had mattered, each act had been consequential. In his memoirs years later, Eisenhower wrote, "Patton's relief of Bastogne vindicated my trust, demonstrated operational excellence, and reminded me why extraordinary talent must sometimes be managed, not constrained. History will remember the victories, but the human decisions, the audacity, and the courage define true leadership." He leaned back, exhaling slowly, eyes resting on the open letters. The snow glimmered on Third Army's tanks outside, a quiet testament to endurance and strategy. Bastogne had been saved, lives preserved, and leadership, tested under pressure, fraught with moral weight, had prevailed. Eisenhower's reflection was simple, yet profound. Victory is measured not only in strategic success, but in the courage to trust, the audacity to act, and the humanity to bear the consequences. He closed his notebook and whispered to himself, "History remembers the battles, but I remember the decisions, the trust, and the men who made the impossible possible." The story of Bastogne was complete, yet its lessons endured: leadership under pressure, faith in extraordinary talent, and the indomitable spirit of soldiers willing to fight against impossible odds.